Welcome to the History AI podcast, where the past comes alive with facts, anecdotes, and a dash of humor. Here are your hosts, Chuck and Marco.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the History AI podcast. I'm Chuck, your friendly neighborhood history nerd, and yes, I still collect medieval battle maps like it's a full-time job.
And I'm Marco, the guy who asks the tough historical questions, like did anyone in the 1400s ever not wear 80 pounds of armor in July?
Before we dive into today's epic tale, a quick reminder, if you're enjoying the podcast, hit subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. It's the best way to help us grow and keep bringing you these dives into history's wildest moments.
Seriously, your reviews are like gold coins in a medieval coffer. And we read every single one, so if you want to shout out, or just want to tell us we made you laugh while learning, drop us a line.
Alright, on to today's episode. We're heading back to 1403, to a field outside Shrewsbury, where royal ambition, betrayal, and one of the nastiest battlefield injuries in English history collide.
Two Henrys walk into a war. Only one walks out with the crown, and the other ends up quartered. This is the Battle of Shrewsbury.
Alright, let's set the scene. It's early 15th century England, and the country is still adjusting to a major political shakeup. Just 4 years earlier, in 1399, Henry Bolingbroke, soon to be King Henry IV, overthrew his cousin, King Richard II.
That's right. Henry Bolingbroke basically pulled a "you can't fire me, I quit," but with swords. He claimed the throne, kicked Richard out, and became the first king of the Lancastrian dynasty.
Now, here's the twist: Henry didn't exactly inherit the crown through peaceful means. He claimed it through force, which made his reign kinda unstable. Think of it as building your house on quicksand while everyone watches with torches and pitchforks.
Yeah, he had some serious imposter syndrome, but with actual imposters. Because not everyone was thrilled about this new king, including some of the very people who helped him seize power.
Enter the Percy family, one of the most powerful noble houses in the north of England. They were instrumental in Henry's rise. Think of them as his MVPs. They provided military support, rallied the north, and helped take down Richard II.
And how did King Henry repay them? With political snubs, unpaid war expenses, and a hearty helping of royal cold shoulder. Exactly the way to make your supporters feel all warm on the inside.
Yeah, relations soured fast. The Percys had spent years defending the northern border against the Scots, out of their own pockets. They also fought the Welsh, led by the legendary rebel Owain Glyndŵr, and expected to be compensated for their efforts.
But instead of gold and glory, they got royal lectures and bureaucratic foot-dragging. Henry IV didn't pay up. Worse, he distrusted them. Especially young Henry Hotspur Percy, who was basically a medieval action hero, brave, hot-headed, and wildly popular with the troops.
Hotspur had won renown in battle, but he also had a strong independent streak. He wanted to deal with Scottish prisoners his own way, maybe even cut some deals behind the crown's back. That didn't sit well with Henry IV, who demanded that all prisoners be handed over to the crown.
Translation: thanks for risking your life in battle, now give me your paycheck. That didn't exactly build trust.
Eventually, the Percys had had enough. By the summer of 1403, they turned against the very king they helped create. Hotspur raised an army in Cheshire, where anti-Henry sentiment was already brewing, and marched south.
And to crank the drama up a notch, they claimed they were fighting to restore King Richard II, despite the fact that Richard had probably been dead for years at this point.
Which, let's be honest, was less about Richard and more about gaining moral high ground. If you can't legitimize your rebellion with money, do it with a ghost king.
So, by mid-July, 1403, Hotspur is charging south with a growing rebel force, and King Henry IV, caught off guard, scrambles to assemble his army. The two forces collide just outside the market town of Shrewsbury, in what will become one of the most pivotal and brutal battles of the entire Lancastrian period.
It wasn't just about personal grudges or unpaid bills. It was about legitimacy, loyalty, and whether a king who seized a crown could hold on to it when tested by war.
And that test was about to come with thousands of longbows, muddy fields, and one of the bloodiest afternoons in English history.
Okay, so it's July 21st, 1403, and the rebel army under Henry Hotspur Percy has made its way to the outskirts of Shrewsbury, a vital market town in western England, near the Welsh border.
Which, geographically, is kind of perfect for Hotspur. He's hoping to join forces with his father, the Earl of Northumberland, and his uncle Thomas Percy, the Earl of Worcester. Not to mention he's angling to link up with Owain Glyndwr's Welsh forces.
Right, but none of those reinforcements ever arrive. He's out there alone, with around 12,000 men, many recruited from Cheshire, a region where Richard II had been deeply popular. These weren't just mercenaries, they were angry, loyal men with something to prove.
Now, King Henry IV isn't sitting on his hands either. Once he hears of the rebellion, he rushes his army northward, covering incredible ground to confront the rebels before they can get stronger. And credit where it's due, that was a smart move.
Definitely. Henry arrives outside Shrewsbury a day before Hotspur expects him. That move catches the rebels completely off guard. Hotspur wanted more time. Instead, he gets a royal army, also about 12,000 to 14,000 strong, already forming battle lines.
And these aren't amateurs. Henry's army includes seasoned longbowmen from the Welsh marches, heavy cavalry, and his teenage son Prince Henry, the future Henry V, who's about to get the hardest lesson in leadership you can imagine.
The battlefield is farmland, not far from the River Severn, open fields, rolling terrain, and no place to hide. Around midday, both armies form up. Negotiations are attempted, probably more out of formality than real hope. Once talks break down, the arrows start flying.
And this is where things get nasty. Both sides have elite English longbowmen, which means both sides can rain death from hundreds of yards away. These are 6-foot yew bows that can punch through armor and hit you before you even see the archer.
Exactly. And what makes Shrewsbury unique is that it's one of the very first major English battles where both sides use longbows against each other. The result? An absolutely horrific death toll in the first few minutes.
Picture it, thousands of arrows blotting out the sun, slamming into lines of infantry, piercing chainmail, horses screaming, commanders trying to stay upright in the mud. Total chaos.
The rebel archers initially have the upper hand. They're positioned slightly uphill and unleash a devastating opening volley that causes panic in the royal ranks. Prince Henry, just 16 years old, is struck in the face by an arrow, right below his eye.
And here's the wild part, he keeps fighting. With an arrow in his skull. He refuses to leave the field, which totally boosts morale. The kid's literally bleeding from the face, and he's shouting orders like a seasoned commander.
Meanwhile, Hotspur sees an opening. He knows if he can kill King Henry IV, the battle's over. So he launches a direct charge at the king's position with his most elite troops, an old-school, high-stakes gamble.
But there's a problem, King Henry's wearing the same armor as a lot of his officers. Confusion breaks out, and the rebels actually kill one of the king's royal standards, mistaking him for the real Henry.
It's a brilliant but flawed tactic. That misidentification buys the king just enough time to rally his household troops and push back. Still, it's close. For much of the battle, the royal army teeters on the edge of collapse.
So now we've got both armies locked in brutal hand-to-hand combat, archers raining death, and two commanders, both named Henry, fighting like madmen to survive. One has an arrow in his face, the other's trying to win a kingdom with sheer willpower.
It's a bloody, frantic, incredibly even fight. But what happens next will turn the tide, forever. So by late afternoon on July 21st, 1403, the battlefield near Shrewsbury is soaked in blood and chaos. The fighting has raged for hours, and both armies are showing signs of exhaustion. Bodies are piling up. Commanders are struggling to maintain control. The air is thick with smoke, mud, and fear.
And in the middle of all that, Henry Hotspur Percy is still charging forward. Even though his plan to assassinate King Henry IV directly has failed, he hasn't backed down. He's in the thick of it, fighting like a knight from a legend. Sword drawn. Armor dented. A one-man rebellion.
But this is where fate, and maybe a bit of miscommunication, steps in. During the final phase of the battle, Hotspur is struck down. We don't know exactly how he dies, there are conflicting reports. Some say he was run through by a spear, others say it was an arrow to the face, similar to Prince Henry's injury, but fatal.
Whatever the cause, when word spreads across the battlefield that Hotspur is dead, it's like a fuse goes out. The rebel army collapses almost instantly. That's how important Hotspur was. He wasn't just a commander, he was the cause.
And let's be clear, Hotspur wasn't just a noble with a grudge. He was beloved by his men. Charismatic, courageous, the kind of guy who inspired loyalty. His death is more than a tactical loss, it's the emotional gut punch that ends the rebellion.
Now, at first, King Henry IV reportedly wasn't even sure Hotspur was dead. Some chroniclers say the king asked, "Is it true that Percy is dead? Then I am the king again."
Once Hotspur's identity was confirmed, the king had his body dragged off the field and stripped for display. At first, Hotspur was buried with some degree of honor in a nearby church, but that didn't last long.
Nope. Henry wanted to make an example. When rumors began spreading that Hotspur had survived, that he was just wounded and hiding, King Henry ordered the body exhumed.
Then came the brutal message: Hotspur's corpse was beheaded, quartered, and his limbs sent to different cities, London, Newcastle, Bristol, and Chester, as a warning to any future rebels.
The head went on a spike over the gates of York, the Percy's own stronghold. Cold and ruthless and, unfortunately, kind of standard for the time.
The Earl of Worcester, Hotspur's uncle, was also captured and executed. The rest of the rebel leaders were either dead, captured, or fled. Without Hotspur, there was no second wave, no rally, no recovery.
And here's the thing, it's not like Henry IV came out of this looking like a saint. He'd won, yes. But this wasn't a clean, glorious victory. He'd barely survived a full-blown rebellion led by men who were once his closest allies.
And the cost was staggering, over 1,600 men killed, with possibly thousands more wounded. Many of the dead were nobles, knights, and long-serving soldiers. It was one of the bloodiest battles on English soil up to that point.
And in the end, Hotspur's legend only grew. He was later immortalized by Shakespeare in Henry IV, Part 1, portrayed as the tragic, noble rebel with fire in his blood. That version still influences how we see him today.
But make no mistake, beneath the myth was a very real man, caught in a brutal power struggle, who went down swinging. His death marked the end of one rebellion, but it wouldn't be the last challenge Henry IV would face.
Not by a long shot. But as far as battlefield deaths go, Hotspur's was the kind that shapes dynasties and leaves scars on history.
So, the Battle of Shrewsbury ends with a royal victory, but the kingdom is far from stable. Henry IV has kept his crown, but at a steep cost. His reign, already plagued by questions of legitimacy, now carries the added weight of civil bloodshed.
Yeah, the optics weren't great. The king who claimed to be restoring order had just fought, and barely won, a civil war against his former allies. That doesn't scream secure monarch.
Not at all. And remember, Henry IV had only been king for 4 years at this point. The rebellion exposed deep cracks in the foundation of his rule, resentment among nobles, financial instability, and a general sense that the country had traded one flawed king for another.
But while Henry IV struggles politically, someone else rises in the public imagination, his son, Prince Henry.
Absolutely. His performance at Shrewsbury was nothing short of heroic. He took an arrow to the face, kept fighting, and helped hold the royal army together during one of its most desperate moments. The surgeons later had to invent a special tool to pull the arrowhead out without killing him.
And the best part? He survives. With a scar, yes, but also with a reputation. That day, the teenage prince began the transformation from rowdy noble son to future warrior king. A decade later, he becomes King Henry V and goes on to win the Battle of Agincourt in 1415. You know, that little battle that Shakespeare also made famous.
In many ways, the seeds of Agincourt are planted right here, at Shrewsbury. It's Prince Henry's crucible, his trial by fire. He earns the respect of the army and the realm by proving that he's not just a prince, he's a leader who can bleed, fight, and survive.
Meanwhile, the legend of Hotspur only grows in depth. Almost immediately, people begin romanticizing him. Loyal, brave, honorable, maybe too honorable for the slippery world of royal politics.
That myth-making really catches fire in the Elizabethan era, when William Shakespeare gives us his version of the events in Henry IV, Part 1. In that play, Hotspur is the noble foil to Prince Hal. He's fiery, impulsive, passionate, and totally doomed.
And Shakespeare really plays up the contrast. On one side, you've got Falstaff and the carefree tavern life of Prince Hal. On the other, Hotspur, the dead serious, battle-hardened warrior who dies fighting for a cause.
It's artistic license, for sure. Hotspur was actually around 23 years older than Prince Henry, not a peer or rival in age. But Shakespeare's version stuck. Today, most people remember Hotspur more from the stage than the history books.
It also helps that Tottenham Hotspur Football Club took their name from him. That's right, Premier League Hotspur is named after this rebel knight. His family once owned land near Tottenham in the 14th century. Talk about legacy.
So what do we take away from all this? The Battle of Shrewsbury wasn't just another medieval clash, it was a turning point. It tested the young Lancastrian dynasty, forged the legend of one king, and ended the story of one of England's most captivating rebels.
It also taught future rulers something crucial: if you seize power, you'd better know how to keep it, and be ready to fight everyone, even your former friends, to hold on.
And maybe don't stiff your warlords on their expense reports. That too.
Always a good policy.
That's it for today's episode, Bloody Fields and Broken Crowns, the Battle of Shrewsbury. A turning point in English history with more drama than an HBO miniseries.
If you liked this episode, please hit that subscribe button, drop us a 5-star review, and share it with your fellow history buffs. It really helps the show grow.
Don't forget to check out our new merch, teas, mugs, and notebooks worthy of a medieval scribe. Links in the show notes.
And if there's a battle, rebellion, or royal scandal you want us to cover, hit us up on social media. We love hearing from you.
Thanks for listening. Remember, our episodes are evergreen, so you can revisit the past anytime, anywhere.
Until next time, stay curious, and maybe don't start a rebellion unless you've got a backup plan.
Especially if your name is also Henry.
Gray sky, 2 lions roared with a traitor's cry. Young Hotspur rose with northern pride, while Harry's son would not be denied. The thunder cracked as steel met bone, brothers in arms, now foes alone. A crown of gold, a rebel's dream, drowned in arrows and battle screams. Blood on the field, cries in the air, honor and glory meet cold despair. A prince with wounds, a rebel slain, the grass drank deep of England's pain. Ride with the brave, fall with the bold, another tale cries in the air. The dead don't speak, but they're still there. A prince reborn, a legend made in blood and steel and cannonade. Ride with the brave, fall with the bold. History's written in